all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to review films either current or classic. And this week we're bringing you not one, but two films from the current category. If you're watching live on YouTube, you may see our Barbie bedecked background. That's because we're reviewing Barbie. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And then we're going to follow that up with a review of Oppenheimer. Not quite as pink of a movie, but should be some interesting discussion and some dichotomy between these two films. I'm looking forward to getting into all the great conversation we're going to have. But before I can do that, let me introduce you to my fellow host of the show, co-host, if you will. Jim Pugliafico is with us in the Pepto-Bismol Pink studio. Jim, how are you?
I'm good, Ken. How are you?
There's something I want to say, but it's a spoiler for the movie, so I'll just say I'm really good. Thank you.
Oh, I knew you would be. Yeah, I'm excited. We got two big movies to talk about. There's a lot, and there's a lot to dive into. Um, I can't wait. It's going to be fun.
So glad you're along for the ride, sweetheart. Welcome. William Lindis is here as well.
Oh no, we just lost Brad, so
Well,
we're gonna just
William Lindis is here as well. So, Will, welcome to the show.
glad to be here, Jim. Although I'm not gonna go through my intro stuff because I'm gonna wait because we'll probably have to take it back for a quick recording. So
Well, maybe,
I will just say
maybe.
hi to Jesse in chat.
Oh, we got Jesse in chat. Nice. I hope we get even more in chat. I hope Jesse, maybe you could tell us in chat if you saw one of these movies or both of these movies. Let us know what you're willing to talk about. Hey, look, I see Brad. I see Brad.
I see.
You know what it
I see
is?
Ken. I see Barbie.
I got kicked out. I think
Yep,
all the
you
pink
did.
overloaded the server and it booted me. So do we need
What
to
did you do to the
rewind?
server?
I think we should rewind.
What did you do with your load in the server? What are you talking about?
Whoa.
You served
Okay.
up a load. I'm sorry. What?
Okay. Should we rewind anything, or are we good to go?
We should rewind. I
Rewind
didn't
to
do, I didn't
introducing
do an
Will.
intro for you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. And William Lindis is with us as well. Hey, Will, how are you?
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Barbie, hi.
Yeah,
Hi,
this is
Barbie.
good. Yeah, Barbie, you're not having the best day ever. What's going on? Now, I'm excited for this episode so much so. I mean, I always love talking movies with the two of you. I mean, that's one thing that we sort of our refrain each week. You know, just no matter what's going on in our personal lives, our professional lives, the world at large, we can always come here and at least for an hour, hour and a half each week, just spitball about whatever movies we've recently seen. But this week has really taken just like movie fandom by storm with our big movies. It's not just films that people have opinions on. It's the whole memification of it all. It's the double feature of it all. It's the
Barbenheimer of it all.
Yeah. And so I'm especially excited to talk about these films. A film by Greta Gerwig, a film by Christopher Nolan. I mean, that it hits all the buttons that I need to have hit. So I'm excited for this episode. So much so that I decided to show up in pink today.
Very nice.
Very
Well,
nice.
glad to have you here with us, Will. Definitely a whole lot to talk about on this episode of the Movie Bears podcast, episode 480, in fact. If you have not seen Barbie, or if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, or if you haven't seen either or both, whatever. We're going to talk about both films spoiler free for about 10 to 15 minutes before we open things up to spoilers. And we'll give you a fair warning before we do. We're not one of those shows that's like, well, we're not going to give any spoilers, but like, here's the biggest spoiler ever, and you don't have a chance to pause. We don't do that on this show. We don't believe in serving false promises. If at all, we can help it. So hang out with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Of course, if you have seen the films, feel free to leave us some thoughts, some comments in the live chat. If you're listening or I guess watching on YouTube or Facebook Live or Twitter. If you are watching or listening through the magic of digital tape delay, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. But Jim, Will, are you ready to get to our first film of this Barbenheimer double feature?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm in the pink Corvette and I'm driving down the road towards Review Land.
Mm-hmm. And I have my finger on the button.
That's a different movie, Jim.
No, we're talking about Oppenheimer. There was a button in that movie.
I'm really confused.
We're doing Barbie. So
we're doing both movies, right?
We're doing both. Yeah.
We're doing Barbie first.
But we'll do Barbie
We're doing
first.
Barbie first.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm ready
This is
to
about
launch
Barbie.
to Barbie. Yes.
Unless we're gonna really mix things up and like if I'll review Barbie while Jim reviews Oppenheimer at the same time, and let's just see where the themes intersect.
I'm like, I sent an agenda. I thought I was clear. All right. And Jim's got a little Ken doll. Nice.
Well, not
Very
really.
nice. All right. Well, then, all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Barbie. All right, Will, do us a favor. Set this one up. I don't think it needs much, but give us a little bit about what this movie is. And, of course, your initial thoughts. What did you think?
Yeah, so this is an adaptation of the popular toy line by Mattel for Barbie and Ken and Barbie's Dreamland and all of the different associated and assorted like toys, accessories, and spin-off characters. In this film, the role of Barbie, the lead Barbie, we'll say, because there are multiple Barbies, all played by different actresses, but the lead Barbie is played by Margot Robbie, and she is just living her life in Barbie land. Everything's going great. Every day is perfect with her and her other Barbies and her question mark boyfriend question mark Ken, played by Ryan Gosling here. But all of a sudden, she starts to have some intrusive thoughts that start to shape the way that she sees the world, and she goes on a quest to try to figure out what's happening to her and why her world isn't as perfect as it used to be. So there is absolutely no reason why a Barbie movie should be considered one of like just the strongest films of the year, and yet here we are. This film does what I think a lot of films aren't allowed to do, and that's it's allowed to play within the studio system and it's allowed to stay within the brand system while also being allowed to sort of be subversive to a degree with the original source material, the themes, and what that thing represents to people, both inside of the world and throughout the years that Barbie has existed in pop culture. I think the closest analogy I can think of to that would probably be something like the Lego movie had a sort of a similar look at sort of the broad ramifications. Part of the joy here is that Greta Gerwig is our director. I think since Frances Ha back in like 2013, I've been just one of the biggest one of the biggest Greta Gerwig stans, right? I think whenever her name shows up on this podcast, it's always like, I think in conjunction with the word stands. So I was already sort of a mark going into this one, especially with her and Noah Baumbach, who is great at writing themes and scripts as a co-writer on this one. What I love so much is this movie is funny. First of all, it's funny. It's so funny. The jokes land. By and large, they land. They throw a bunch of things at the wall. And just like with any comedy, not everything clicks, but I think the vast majority of them do. Margot Robbie is absolutely breathtaking in this role. She is allowed to be both plastic and vulnerable at the same time, which is, I think, hard to do, but especially hard to do given the constraints of what she has to do here. The film itself has so much sincerity, so much heart, and so many moments that will make you well up with tears, which, again, I want to remind you, this is the Barbie movie. And it somehow is just able to just make grown men cry left and right. It's sincerely great. It's and not just for the memification of it all, not just because of how silly it is to have it up against Oppenheimer this weekend. This was a very, very good movie. made by an incredibly confident and competent filmmaking team. Everyone involved understood the assignment completely and put together something that I think has the potential to stand the test of time in terms of these types of films. So it's a huge recommendation. I can't celebrate this film enough, which again, it's the Barbie movie, but here we are.
All right. Well, Will, thank you so much for the setup of this film and also your very glowing recommendation to see this one. Jim, how about for you? Did Barbie do it for you as much as it did for Will? What did you think?
Yeah, I think I will. I'm right there with you. I think I really this film was a huge surprise to me. Coming in, we had seen the trailer several times in front of other films, and every time I don't know if it's a case of it's one of those times where the trailer doesn't really do the movie much justice, or it's just hard to put out a trailer that would really represent this movie because this movie is much more than what I got out of the trailer for sure. And it was a huge, pleasant surprise this summer. This movie, maybe for the whole year. I just I'm kind of in awe at the way this movie was able to present this kind of, if you think about it on the surface, this kind of goofy doll world with doll characters, a lot of comedy that does work, Will, but yet also can have its cake and eat it too by being, socially relevant with some themes that are really strong. We'll get into some of those maybe definitely in spoilers, but this movie does walk that line without the comedy like detracting from its themes or its themes being so heavy that it detracts from the entertainment value of the comedy in this movie. It kind of hits that perfect middle ground, and for that I'm kind of in awe as the way they did it. You mentioned Margot Robbie; she's amazing in this. A lot of really fun performance. This movie's just fun. I mean, besides the emotional stuff, we'll talk about some of that, but and the themes or the messages that this movie tries to convey through the comedy. The Some of the other performances were great too. I loved Kate McKinnon here in a really fun role, and Ryan Gosling, who, I mean, who would have expected? Like, I'd have to go back and look at his IMDb. Has the comedy that he delivers here really works and really lands as his character. But yeah, I'm going to stop there because we'll talk more about it. But I did love this movie. Brad will attest. We have now seen this twice, so we don't usually repeat movies, but this one was kind of special. I mean, and I know Brad. You could talk about it more, but we were happy to see it twice.
I don't know, Brad. Are you ready to bring us down?
Well, he had to see it twice. He had to see it twice because
Yeah, this is usually the point in the
he
review.
Wasn't sure the first time.
Yeah,
It was just so freaking bad. Had to see it again just to make absolutely sure it was that bad. Oh no, we're talking about Barbie. Sorry, got my movies mixed up. So I fucking loved Barbie. Barbie was fantastic. I did not expect to love Barbie. I thought Barbie was going to be a flaming pile of shit. And it was not. It tripped so many triggers for me. And it was just such a surprise for me. We have said many times on the show, it probably amounts to like 500 plus times, that comedy is weird for me. I don't always vibe with the comedy that other people do. But something about the comedy in this film really just fucking slam dunked for me on a variety of levels. And when we get into spoilers, I can talk about it because it involves making some specific references that might be spoilers. But I think it helped me identify a certain type of comedy that really works for me. And so now I'm excited to find like other movies that maybe exemplify that type of comedy that maybe I'll enjoy. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Um, This movie, you know, it's about Barbie Land and what's going on with Barbie and Ken, and on paper, especially add Will Ferrell into the mix, it really looks like this is just going to be goofy and dumb and not really much of anything. But this movie has a really heartfelt message. It's got some really great social commentary. I know of at least 3 gay men who walked out of this film because they felt their masculinity was attacked and they were devalued. Um, that's kind of interesting. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But I don't know. It's proving to be kind of like a really cool conversation starter, and it's getting people talking about issues that we probably should have been talking about the last 50 years, but nobody wanted to listen until they're in a fucking Barbie movie. So kudos to Greta Gerwig and, you know, all of the cast that made this movie so special. I do want to give a big shout out to America Ferrera. She played Gloria, the mom, in this one. And she was fucking fantastic. She was so, so good. Margot Robbie, amazing as Barbie. But I think the real standout here, Jim, you already talked about him, Ryan Gosling as Ken. Just blew me the hell away in so many good ways. So I will say I gave this movie 4.5 stars. This was the first movie to break a 4 rating of the year for me. I left half a star off because of the Will Ferrell stuff. Did not like it all. But the rest of it was magical, super funny, really got me thinking. And I mean, I've seen it twice and I want to see it again. So that should really tell you something. Also, it made me like a Billie Eilish song, which I didn't think was possible. And yet somehow here we are. I now own that song. I gave Billie Eilish a little money.
He
So
bought the
I,
song.
I, I
Everybody.
bought the song. I bought the song. So, you know, let that tell you what it will. But yeah, this was fantastic. Such a win for me.
It's interesting you
Oh,
mentioned the
and sorry, real quick, the theater we went to, Galaxy, had these amazing Barbie cups. I'm, you know, if you're just listening to the audio, obviously you can't see it, but this is like my new favorite
Will.
possession. Will, I know you've got something you want to show too. It's Barbie show and tell time.
It's
What have you
Barbie
got?
show and tell time. Yeah. So at Alamo Draft House, you could get these like metal lunch boxes and thermos kits.
Remember those?
Ooh.
Yeah. That accompanied the movie and the branding, but with a little Alamo logo. So it's interesting you mentioned the music on this one because I'm kind of the same way, but reversed. I love Billie Eilish. Like I think she's one of the just best musicians of the last like 5-10 years to like kind of come out and just sort of create a soundscape that you know is definitive of both the era and her as a musician and everything like that. And I think a lot of times you hear musicians come to a soundtrack and it sometimes feel like they give their like, you know, their B cut of a song, you know, or just something like, oh, well, I'm going to be in the Barbie movie. So here, have this song, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is not the case with what Billie Eilish and Phineas wrote for this film. The song hits the themes of the movie so incredibly well. It plays at an incredibly like poignant point in the film, and it also is not so tied in directly to the language of the film that it can't stand alone and also be something that you can personally reflect on. So this is like an example of like the perfect marriage between an artist who's this is an artist who was criticized for her looks for the longest time on stage because she wasn't skinny or she wore baggy clothes or she didn't dress in a very specifically feminine overtly, you know, stereotypically feminine way. And I think that pairing that with Barbie is incredibly powerful.
So we have a big question in the live chat from Steve Zosa, who says,
Hey, Steve.
do I get my gay card revoked if I say I didn't like Barbie? First of all, hey, Steve, always good to see you show up. Hello. Fellas, say hi. And what do you think? Do we need to take his card away or no?
Absolutely not. You asking me or who you asking?
Brad through Steve. Brad is inhabiting Steve's question and presenting it to the two of us. Did you have any more to elaborate, Jim?
No, I mean, look, we've covered this before. There are movies out there that, you're gonna find 90% or more of the people out there really dug or loved that you just didn't vibe with you, or the other way around, or you're gonna vibe with a movie that a lot of people maybe didn't like, and that happens. We all have our different kind of soft spots and stuff. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with not liking this movie, and I don't know. I would never think my opinion is the definitive opinion on anything, for sure. So they're just opinions. From three movie lovers, that's all you're gonna get.
Yeah, a couple of points on that. Like, first of all, as you mentioned, Jim, opinions are just that. We are here just to talk about kind of how we felt about movies. Like, our opinions matter a lot to the three of us. Our opinions don't matter beyond this because everyone's opinion kind of holds equal weight, right? But there are a couple of things that I do want to hit on there, in that, in terms of the G card, like, are you a good gay or a bad gay if you like or don't like a good media? You are a good gay if you feel like you're a good gay. The media that you choose to consume or not consume has nothing to do with that. Now, I will say that there are some bad faith criticisms of the film that are happening right now. And there are some people who are saying, well, it features female empowerment, therefore it's woke feminist propaganda, therefore it's bad. You can guess which type of pundits are making that argument. And I do think that, there is a such thing as bad opinions. And I do think that those are bad opinions, because those are not sincere opinions. Those are bad faith opinions. But just whether you enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it doesn't, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to you. It doesn't matter to anyone, because it's all subjective, man.
Agreed.
Absolutely agree here as well. Steve says, I mean, it was bad, but honestly, I think Will Ferrell took me out of it. He's the same guy in every movie. Steve, more on that to come. Believe me. But Jim, Will,
Yeah.
how do you feel about
tables can be flipped very easily in this show?
That's true.
I'm sorry,
Jim. Are you guys ready to talk spoilers?
Yeah, let's do the thing. Wait, is there a good transition from Barbie? I'm trying to think what that might be, I can't just do Hi Barbie again. I guess, okay, you know what? Maybe now's a good opportunity for us to all get in our pink Corvette and then have our rollerblades ready and our snowmobiles and our rocket ships and head on over to Spoilerland.
All right. And I see Jim nodding as well. So let's open things up officially to spoilers. You have 15 seconds while I awkwardly ramble to give you an opportunity to eject from the live broadcast if you need to, or just put us on mute for 17 minutes, 41 seconds, and then come back for Oppenheimer. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, etc., Jim, who is wonderful in putting a time index together for us as he's editing the show, you can use his hard work, his time index, to go ahead and skip forward to Oppenheimer if you need to. And it's kind of on you at that point. It's a choose your own adventure, so do what you need to do. But spoilers for Barbie are officially fair game. Where do you guys want to start?
I mean, I'd like to start with the two moments that most impacted me, just because I think that it's easy to come out of a comedy and say the comedy worked, therefore I liked it. But when you walk out of a comedy and say it made me feel things, that's usually the type of thing where it sinks its teeth into you a little bit more. There's this scene. Barbie's gone into the real world. Okay. Because at this point, her feet no longer have that classic Barbie arch to them. They're now flat. She's developed a little patch of cellulitis. She's starting to think about death. She's just starting to have things that we would consider to be normal things that people normally in the world would experience. But that's not part of Barbie land. It's not the ideal. It's not the image. So she goes on this quest, and there's this moment where she's sitting in the real world and she's looking around everything. She's at this like bus stop, and she sees just the trees, and she sees people just experiencing things. There's people that are experiencing like a kiss. There's some people that look like they're experiencing like sadness. There's people that are experiencing just all sorts of different things. And then there's this older woman sitting next to her at the stop, and she just looks over and goes, "Oh my God, you're beautiful," to this old woman. And it reminded me a lot of what this movie was really trying to make us feel. And that's, for the longest time, these Barbie toys have been sort of looked at as a bad thing, societally, because it's like this impossible image that we have to hold women to. This is an ideal of what beauty should be. I don't think that was the original intention from the creator of these toys, who wanted them to be aspirational instead. This is a woman who, Barbie is a woman who is not just a mother who has to do motherly things. Not that that's anything bad, but you can be a physicist, you can be a scientist, you can be a teacher, you can be a rock star, you can be the president, all of these things as a woman, as Barbie. And I think in that moment, Barbie realizes that the real beauty is just in how different and how real and how sincere and how multi-layered and nuanced just the world is. And that made me feel the same thing about the world, right? And again, I keep going back to this phrase. This is a Barbie movie, but the Barbie movie made me look at the world in a slightly different way. So I think there's something very valuable at that. So that's one of the two moments that really got me misty-eyed. Did you guys have a similar experience during that scene?
Babe,
I think for me, oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, I just said, did you?
Yeah, I had a moment. Not necessarily. Sorry, I got totally derailed. Will, what was the? Yeah, I think we may be having a delay or something that's going on. Will, can you just remind me, what scene were you talking about again?
Yeah, the bus scene where Barbie is seeing the world and says to the lady next to her, "Just, you look so beautiful."
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely a cool moment to see. Barbie, stereotypical Barbie at that, who's like supposed to be the epitome of like female beauty, turn to someone who, is maybe not fitting of that image, but to find like beauty in her that like, touches her so deeply. I think that was such a fantastic moment. I didn't cry, but I do think it sort of feeds into a moment where I did cry later in the film, where Barbie has met Ruth, the creator of Barbie, the ghost of Ruth. And Barbie has this opportunity in her discussion with Ruth to basically become human. And Barbie's like, "Well, you're my creator. Like, is it okay for me to become human?" And Ruth is like, "Well, why would you have to ask permission for that?" And she's like, "Well, you made me, and I'm this and I'm that." And the message is basically that like you don't have to ask permission to be the person that you want to be. And I think that moment you mentioned, Will, kind of starts Barbie like along this path, like seeing beauty and fulfillment outside of the constructs of Barbie land, right? And I think they tie together really well. So it's kind of like almost like the real beginning of that arc and the end of that arc to me.
Yeah, babe, that was probably the most emotionally impactful part of the film too for me. It was a real. I don't know if you guys got the same thing I did, but it was totally lifted from Pinocchio. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, even Ruth is dressed in all blue, like the blue fairy, right? Where she says,
Mm.
"Look, you didn't have to, come and ask me to be a real boy. If you feel it, you can be it, right?" I mean, that was a total Pinocchio moment, which was kind of cool, the way they framed that. But it did still touch me. And one of the things that got me was, here I am thinking I'm watching basically the same scene I've seen in how many Pinocchio movies now, right? And now it's in a Barbie movie, and it's just like it's just talks about the power of good storytelling. Like you go back in time to when that was first created, and still like now, like hundreds or I don't know how many hundreds of years later, you know that the feelings from that scene still resonate, right? No matter what property it's in, when it's well handled. And I think it was really well handled here. But there were so many other great. I mean, that was probably the most emotionally stirring part of the movie for me was that last scene with Ruth the Blue Fairy. But like, I think there was so many great things in it. Like the musical stuff was fantastic. Like especially, um, you know, Ryan Gosling. Like, who knew that like the most special musical moments would really come from him, right? He has a song in here called I'm Just Ken, which is pretty awesome. It comes before a really fun like battle scene, I guess you could call it, on the beach where they're like invading the beach on beach toys and stuff, and it's really cool. And then he has a scene on the beach where he's singing, playing a guitar and singing the oh, help me with the band, the song,
This is when he's doing Matchbox
the
20
Push,
by Push,
Yeah,
right?
Push from Matchbox
yeah,
20.
Push,
Yeah.
right, yeah, where it's so hilarious, just like it was almost like Rob Thomas came. Is that his name, Rob
Uh-huh.
Thomas?
Yeah. Yeah.
Came and gave him like singing lessons, like how to sing that song, because he had all the like little vocal inflections down, and it was like, okay, he's really into this role, right? If he's giving that much of a performance here, yeah, just some really great stuff. And then of course, America Ferrera's speech part, right? The mom's
Oh man.
speech in when they're at Weird Barbie's pad. And she's giving the speech to the Barbies to try to shake them out of their, you know, the patriarchy spell, I guess.
Mm.
But really cool stuff. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff in this movie.
You know, I want to
You
talk a
mentioned
little bit.
too.
No, go.
Oh, yeah, we may have a delay going on. Sorry about that. Jim, you mentioned two really great things about this movie. The first one was the guitar scene, and yeah, I was cracking up the whole time. But that really hit for me because I had a partner in the past in my younger days who would play guitar at me and like sing songs at me like while staring uncomfortably into my eyes, and it was super weird. And you know, so that
For
really
four and a
resonated.
half minutes.
Except they're all Dave Matthews songs. And then the other thing you mentioned, the speech that America Ferrera gives, and you know, I know that speech was very targeted to like female empowerment and you know agency, and those are wonderful things. But I also related a little bit too as like a gay man. There's this part of the speech where she says, you can't say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but you actually have to be thin. And for me, it was kind of like, well,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can't say that like you want to be homosexual, but like, you know, you have to be normalized. And like, I don't know, I felt a little of that. And then also too, like being a
Mm-hmm.
bigger person, you know, I think about like the Chub and Chaser community and, you know, certainly not trying to throw shade at anyone specifically, but like as a big guy in the community of people who like big men, if you're like, oh man, I went to the gym today and I got a 45-minute elliptical in, and you know, it was great. I'm working on losing some pounds. You know, a lot of the chasers are going to be like, okay, that's nice, whatever. Like they're not supportive because you know you're the big guy that they're attracted to, and if you're losing weight, like you lose value because you're losing attraction, and I don't know. That just kind of hit home a little bit. So, yeah, some great call outs there, Jim. Really, really well done stuff there.
You know, going back to the Matchbox 20 of it all, there that song when they do Push. So there's two soundtracks that exist for this movie, right? There's the first one that they released, and then they came out with another one that was like, I forget, deluxe edition. It has like 4 additional songs on it. One of those additional songs on the deluxe edition is Ryan Gosling doing Push. And it is the funniest thing you've ever heard in the world because he's singing the song well, but he's also making fun of Rob Thomas along the way.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
especially when he gets to the "I wanna take you for ground," like just not even pronouncing words as much as just sort of like growling through them. I swear, like I've been listening to it on repeat because it makes me bust a fucking gut every single time. So
Yeah, I was cracking up. I was cracking up during the film watching him do it. Like it's
Yeah.
just kind of crazy.
Yeah. But you mentioned the speech, and I think this goes to a point that you made in the pre-spoiler section, Brad, about the some people who were maybe not feeling it because of some of the themes of the movie, and that also goes into I think there's both good faith and bad faith versions of that, right? One of the things that I really appreciated here is this is a movie that this was not a women good men bad movie. That's not what this movie was at all. This is a movie that was, if you look at it, once the characters sort of learn about what patriarchy is, and what traditional male roles and traditional female roles are and how we're supposed to embody them, everybody's lives get upended in this. And so there's definitely there is definitely a strong feminist undercurrent to that, because there should be, as these characters sort of balk back against that. But even the male characters, all the Kens, essentially, all the different Kens, they're also damaged and impacted by these roles and by the patriarchy and all of that. So that's one of the things that I appreciated here. This was a movie about an issue, but it did so in a way that didn't really punch at anyone, but it did really like strip bare like how much harm these things can do. I thought that was good. I think that was smart, and I think
Yeah.
that that's hard to do well.
Did the movie also make the point that the living in Barbie land, the Kens were treated like it was kind of a dichotomy, right? You have the roles were kind of switched. Like least at the beginning, living in Barbie land, the Kens were subjected to a power deficit, right? Like a power. I don't know what you call it, but Barbie was asked, "Where do the Kens live?" Oh, I don't know. I never thought of that. Like like they were. I don't know what the right word is, but they were definitely at a lower level, right, than the Barbies in the world, even though they lived in that world. And we get to the real world and things are switched, and that's where things go kind of crazy. And I thought that was really well done. I thought the movie tried a little bit to make that point. Look, the movie uses the patriarchy in the real world to make its major points, as it should, like you said, Will. But I think there are, if you dig a little deeper, there are points to be made across the board about how we treat each other, right? From whatever position of life that we're at. And so I thought I thought it was interesting the way the movie did that. Kind of at the end, I think. I don't know if they said Ken can have his own house or something like that. It was kind of in there at the end, but and I just want to bring that around to say I didn't dig all of the Will Ferrell stuff. I know they wanted to bring Mattel into this, which I think was kind of a cool, Mattel is the big company responsible for Barbie. They did have a hand in this movie too, which was kind of interesting if you think about it. They were fully on board with this movie, even though they were really the butt of pretty much all the jokes, all the jokes in the movie. So I liked that. I liked that they brought that in. I just didn't like all of it that they had. I wasn't really on board with all of the corporate world Will Ferrell stuff that they put in this movie.
Brad, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more on that, because you were, I think, probably of all the three of us in our intros, the one who most called out kind of the Will Ferrell stuff being distasteful to you. And I know Steve Sosa in chat says it as well. So yeah, how did you go for the jugular?
Well, I mean, it only took half a star off the movie for me, so it's not like it was the most terrible thing ever. But I just felt like it really kind of detracted from the the greater themes and the better moments. I mean, the stuff in Barbie Land is what was most interesting to me. Some of the real world stuff, you know, Ken finding out all about the patriarchy and horses. And Jim, I'm looking for that lampshade, by the way, on
I bet you
Amazon. We'll
are.
see if we
I
can
bet
find
you
it.
are. I bet you are.
But I think the real world stuff would have been much better if we didn't have the Will Ferrell like boardroom stuff, and then them coming into Barbie Land. Like they keep showing these shots of them like on their way to Barbie Land, like on the tandem bikes and the camper van and da 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 da. But like they end up showing up during the Ken fight, and it's like, oh, oh, right. That's a plot thread for this movie too. I forgot about them and like the actual fun stuff that was going on. I felt like they just really, I don't know, they didn't. It didn't really lend a lot to this film. It pulled more away, I think, for me at least. And maybe I'm not alone, Steve. Pulled more away than it added. But a lot of people really love Will Ferrell's comedic styling, so maybe it really worked well for
Yeah.
them. I don't know, but it didn't so much for me.
Look, of all the comedy stuff in this movie, all of it right together, most of it really worked well. I mean, it was really good. But most of the stuff that didn't work, that just kind of laid there and fell flat, was related to the Will Ferrell character, and maybe it's because I'm just so used to his shtick. You know what I mean? It's like, ugh, give me more of the fresh stuff that's happening in Barbie Land. But yeah, most of the comedy with the chase through the office building and stuff like that just kind of fell flat compared to just some of the the sparkle that we got from a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah, and that's fair. We didn't get as much. I go back to the Lego movie, and I would say that, like, the Will Ferrell character there, he specifically has sort of like a kind of a wacky role and then a more sincere role, and then kind of the way that those things combine together thematically. We have less of that here, because the theme here is more about Barbie and Ken and the way that they impact the America Ferrera character and all of those things. So I think that's where the focus is. What I did enjoy about that character was less the character itself, but I loved some of the like references that Greta Gerwig pulls into this movie. First of all, there is an amazing Vanity Fair, I believe, video where she does this like review of like the 31 movies or whatever it is that inspired her to make this movie. And y'all, Greta Gerwig has done her homework. This movie is a homage to like French New Wave and like classic like silver screen musicals like Singing in the Rain, with the way that matte paintings work. But that the reason I bring all this back, there's one scene that made me appreciate it a lot more. There's this movie from Jacques Tati in the 60s called Playtime, where they have this, it's an absurdist movie with like, it shows like sort of the absurdities of modern day life, which makes sense for this. But there's this spot with all of these cubicles, and it is exactly the fucking shot that she pulls in for when they're in Mattel and they're doing the chase scene in the cubicles. And it is she did not have to put that reference in there. It doesn't affect anything, but the fact that she did just was like, okay, so she's drawing a parallel to something else about how absurd real life is and kind of pulling that together. Nothing was accidental in this movie. Even the decisions that I think work better or worse, the Mattel stuff overall, I would say is the least compelling stuff. I still appreciate how intentional it was. And I think that's the big takeaway. And why I think, from your point there, I think in some movies this would be like you could knock like 2 stars off for like, certain sections, and it's only a half star because it didn't click, but you can at least see like why it was there. And I think that's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. Most definitely.
What was I going to mention? There were probably a lot of, I'll have to watch that video, Will, because I think there were a lot of subtle references to other films, maybe, in this. There was one I caught from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, of all the fucking movies, like, because there was a little bit of Jeff Spicoli in Ryan Gosling's Ken's character. And at one point when he says, "Oh, we're going to catch some morning waves," I'm like, that is Jeff Spicoli right there. Like he pulled that line right from that movie, which is one of my all-time favorite comedies.
Definitely a great catch there, Jim, for sure. I know that we have a whole nother movie to talk about, and we can
Yeah.
make that transition soon. So we can do some final thoughts real quick. My final thought to kick us off is just the comedy thing that I mentioned earlier. There were a couple things that I really was just tickled by. The whole like beat you off
Oh God,
like
yeah.
jawing at each other thing, like, oh, I'll beat you off so hard. No one's gonna beat each other off, like uh pun, whatever you want to call it.
No one's
That
gonna
really
beat
got me.
anybody off. Yeah.
And then the second thing was this movie used a lot of like, I don't know, I'm calling it like backhanded sarcasm revelations. I don't even know how to articulate it. But it's a thing I noticed where like the joke is like initially set up as something genuine, but then there's like a back-ended like U-turn that takes it back to like being insulting. And one clear example I can think about is when the president at the end of the movie to Weird Barbie says, "I'm sorry that we called you Weird Barbie behind your back and to your face." And it was just like initial apology and then wham, zinger.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about like other movies and things that have done that. That film we saw with Jennifer Lawrence a few weeks ago, No Hard Feelings, that I really liked. She did a lot of that in that movie. Her
Hmm.
character, like the way that she like insulted people, like was initially genuine and then U-turn into insult. And so now I really need to, I guess, think about like every other comedy movie I've ever laughed at and try and figure out if there's a correlation.
Ooh, okay. So first week that there's like a really, really, really dull week in terms of movies, Brad, you just need to come with like your 20 like last comedies that you can think of that made you laugh, and we're just gonna Venn diagram them. We're gonna figure out
Okay.
what that overlying element is and go like, all right, what's a movie that has these elements and see if our theory holds true. We're gonna do it for movie science, is what I'm saying.
There we go.
For science.
Awesome. Jim, how about you? Do you got a final thought on Barbie?
Oh boy. I will say I did love the Alan character in this film, and I don't. Oh, what I really wanted to say was there's a whole nother layer to this movie that we didn't talk about because I didn't play with Barbies as a kid. I might have had a GI Joe or two, but even then I wasn't really that into it. But like if somebody's really into Barbies and remembers all the Barbies and all the different like iterations, like there's a layer of this movie that I think somebody did their homework because there's a lot of they're throwing out outfits that they sold for Barbie, and they're like in that little thing where they're throwing them off the top
Mm-hmm.
of the Dojo Casa house, right? And they do ping, and then they like freeze in midair, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, the blah 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 suit," and I'm sure a lot of that stuff was real, were real, you know, toys and accessories that you could buy. That whole Barbie world of the not just the dolls but the accessories and the camper van and the boat and the ski-mobile and well the Corvette and all that stuff. There's a whole layer of the movie that you could appreciate just on that level if that's what you wanted to do. So it's a rich movie. It's way more rich, right? Intelligently rich than I would have ever expected this movie to be.
Agreed, for sure. Great call out. My sister must have had like 20 different Barbie outfit packs that she would get for like Christmas and her birthday, and each
Yep.
outfit had like a very specific name with a little trademark symbol at the end of the name.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Will, how about you? Final thoughts, Barbie,
Uh,
go.
Yeah, I mean, rich is the exact word for this film. And I think that if we're going to give movies credit for sort of diving deep into their own real world lore, like a superhero movie or Transformers, or for any of those things, when you see certain things in the background, like, oh, they included this character. That's my favorite G.I. Joe. I'm glad he showed up in the background of this or whatever. Um, I think it's only fair to give that same credit to the Barbie movie for the same thing, right? You know, you're right. Like these are things like uh, Sugar's daddy Ken was an actual toy that came out, and so they included that there, and because it's silly. And I saw it at Alamo Drafthouse, right? And so one of the things that happens at Alamo Drafthouse is when you get there early, they play pre-reel for like those 30 minutes that is custom designed for whatever that film is. So I watched 30 minutes of curated Barbie commercials. And so
Oh wow.
so what that means is whenever some of the weirder ones came up, like the little dog that you know you
That
push the
eats
little
and
thing
poops.
and
Yep.
eats and poops, I saw the commercial for that. I saw the commercial for the video camera Barbie. I saw the one for Skipper whose boobs. I watched all of those commercials in that 30 minutes beforehand. So it made the experience of like, holy shit, all of these things really existed, even more rich too. So there's probably, I think Alamo puts all of their pre-reels up on, or several of them up on like YouTube. So I would look to see if there's any like Barbie commercials through the years or anything like that on YouTube
Oh,
after
I'm sure
watching
there
this
is.
movie, or even before watching this movie. If you haven't seen this, I know there are people out there who were blocked out of seeing this movie. They wanted to see it, but it was sold out. So watch some of the commercials before you go see it because it will like add to the experience.
All
Yeah,
right. Excellent.
babe, we need to go find like a Barbie commercials through the years video on YouTube. I'm sure there will be one.
Yes.
Whether it's the Alamo's one
Let's
or
do it.
not, I don't know, but there'll be one. It'll be fun to watch. We'll be like, oh, that was in the movie. Yeah, that'll be fun.
I'm super on board. Let's do it. It'll be like a Barbie bomb went off in our house. Get it? Because we're about to talk about Oppenheimer. All
Right.
right. Well, super fun discussion on Barbie. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts. And thank you for those who were commenting in the live chat. We didn't get to every comment. But I did want to just say that Jesse had a really great call out about those different outfits. He says there was a market for each dress and accessory. So
Oh, yeah.
those things do seem very tailored. Towards certain, age ranges and demographics, adult collectors, kid collectors, etc. So, Jesse, thanks so much for calling that out. Appreciate you. We're doing it. We're making the transition over to Oppenheimer. You know how I know we're transitioning to Oppenheimer? Because
You could
our
stall all you
background
want, Brad, but it's coming.
has changed to an atomic bomb cloud with us floating in the clouds. So there you go. It is Oppenheimer time. If you haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, don't worry. We're going to give you our initial thoughts for about 10 minutes, and then we'll get into spoilers. We'll give you fair warning before we take things there so you can step away as needed. But Jim, Will, let's fricking do this. Here we go. Our review of Oppenheimer. All right, Jim, give us a brief setup for Oppenheimer, if you don't mind, and your initial thoughts. Was this a great one to see in theaters? Would you maybe wait for streaming? Would you not see it at all? Where did you come down?
Oh boy, so there's a lot to talk about with this one as well, and I know we just got done with a big movie, but both of these movies came out this weekend. It was crazy at the movie theater. That could be a whole nother podcast, but this is Oppenheimer. This is Christopher Nolan's latest film. He's the writer director of this film, which is the story of American scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his role in the development of the atomic bomb. And I'm pretty sure that Oppenheimer's been the subject of other movies before, I'm pretty sure. But hey, this is a Christopher Nolan movie. Most movie fans are familiar with Christopher Nolan films up through, The Dark Knight and Dunkirk and Tenet, and there's probably a lot of others in there that I'm leaving out. And now we have one that is basically a biopic. So this is really straight up. This is a biopic about J. Robert Oppenheimer. So it's kind of Nolan stepping out of his normal like actiony actiony epics, I guess, if you will, to like a more subdued, let's say just more, what's the word I'm looking for? Internalized kind of drama about the life and contributions of J. Robert Oppenheimer and his struggles. Yeah, so this one here, and we'll get into it probably a little later, talk about our movie watching experience with this, because this one came out, this one was a 3 hour long film. That was pretty evident right off the bat. People going into it probably knew that it was going to be a long one. It came out in several formats, including, 70 millimeter IMAX, 70 millimeter, and then the normal digital distribution that we get now for most films. We saw it in 70 millimeter, not IMAX, but 70 millimeter at a theater, the Loft here, Will, as you know, that had a 70 millimeter equipment to project this on their largest screen, which is not even close to IMAX. I really liked this film. I appreciated this film a lot. I liked a lot of it. Is it a perfect film? No, far from it. But I did like a lot of what this film offered. Specifically, the performances here, I think, are fantastic. I think Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Florence Pugh, Robert Downey Jr. is in this one. Wow, I just noticed that Scott Grimes was in this, and I didn't even notice him in the movie. That's strange. Babe, did you notice that? Maybe you noticed that. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I thought the performances here were top notch. I think Cillian Murphy will definitely see an Oscar nomination from this movie. I just think it's one of those performances I almost like it was so magnetic. You just can't almost take your eyes off him on the screen. And I always liked Cillian Murphy and everything he did, but in this, he's really like, front and center in this movie and carries it and does a great job. Yeah, that's all I'll say for now. I really like this movie. I think if you're gonna see it, I do think it's worth seeing. It's not what I would call a spectacle film like Dunkirk was, or maybe Tenet with all the action and the reverse time telling and all that stuff. There is some time. There is a little time jumping in this, but certainly nothing to that degree. But I still say it's worth seeing on a big screen if you can. I think it's beautifully photographed. I mean, his films are photographed, on film. So, I just think they look great. I just think, his eye, or I don't know who his primary cinematographer is, but the guy does a great job. Yeah, I think this one is worth seeing. I think it's worth seeing at the movie theater. As long as you can get through a 3 hour movie. I did have to get up and pee once, but that's not unusual for me. Yeah, Oppenheimer. I think it's a great film. I think well, I'm going to let it go with that. I'll just let it go. I've talked long enough. I'll get my chance later.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts, babe. And I did not see Scott Grimes, so I'm surprised to hear that called out. I choose to believe that he's a time traveler from the Orville back in Oppenheimer's day, and that's why he's in the movie. Well, let's hear your thoughts, friend. I know a little bit how you feel based on social media, but lay it on us. Give us the full William Lindis layout. What did you think?
Yeah, so this is the second of the amazing films that came out this weekend, right? I think that going into this weekend, there was the Barbenheimer meme, right? And what we got from it was marketing for two films. But what these films are, between what Christopher Nolan does and what Greta Gerwig does, these are two incredibly focused filmmakers who use every aspect of the craft to make their stories work, right? You know, they're visual storytellers, they're storytellers, music and score and editing, and the way all of these things all blend together to tell their stories. And um, 3 hour biopics are not usually my thing. There's a lot of them that get nominated, and a lot of them that are not for me, because they're typically kind of womb to tomb style films. But man, this one really was kinetic for me. Part of it's the cinematography. So Jim, you mentioned that this is Hoyt van Hoytema. This is the cinematographer, the DP who um, worked on Tenet, and he's worked on Interstellar and several other Nolan films. He also did Nope. He did Ad Astra. Got a fantastic eye, right? You know, so I think that he's very good at putting things into frame and telling them in a compelling way. But also, on top of all of that, this is a film that, yes, there are some effects. Obviously, there's some like kind of big screen effects, but a lot of it is just procedural conversations, people talking in courtrooms, people talking in classrooms, people talking in fields, people talking. And the decision to shoot all of this in that IMAX 65 millimeter, you know, format, and projected onto big screen. You know, you saw it 70 millimeter. I saw it in an IMAX, you know, and seeing it in that big format, this movie looks good. Even when it's just someone's face on screen, it looks so good. But just on top of all of that, I loved every single performance in here. This is another example of everybody understood the assignment and showed up. I think this is one of Nolan's most mature films to date. He is a filmmaker who makes these sort of big, grandiose, serious films, you know, and this is definitely one of those as well. But I think that it has a lot of texture in it, as it's sort of weaving its way through these few sort of like integral moments in Oppenheimer's life, how those things impacted both what he was doing, the mark that he had on history, and the legacy that he was left with after he had made that mark on history. And I think all of those things paint the picture of a man who is known for a thing and haunted by a thing. And I think that that is an incredibly compelling way to tell this story. Yeah, it's one of those films that when I got to the end of it, I was just stunned by what I had watched. And again, having just watched Barbie the day before, I didn't do them back to back, but you know, I saw them, you know, one and then one the next day. It just made me think, like, thank God for movies, like being able to go to a full theater 2 days in a row with people that were excited to see the movie and people that were engaged with it and people that were just ready to go for like the full movie experience. Again, I know Barbenheimer was a meme, but thank God for that meme, because it got these films in front of a lot more eyes than I think they would normally have gotten. And hopefully then that'll get people hungry for whatever the next thing is, so they can go see that as well. So I'm a big fan of this one. Huge recommend. You know, one of my favorite Nolan films.
All right. Well, Will, thank you so much for kind of walking us through your thought rationale here. Sounds like this one was definitely a big recommend for both you, Jim. Maybe a little less so, but still pretty up there for you. For me, I think a little bit of a different experience, but I'll start with some of the things that I really liked. Cillian Murphy here was fucking fantastic. I will not be surprised to see Oscar nods come his way if the Oscars are still happening, given everything going on in Hollywood right now. But I sure hope he gets the recognition that he deserves, because he was really, really great here. It's interesting. There's this whole thing on Reddit right now as to whether Cillian Murphy was actually smoking the cigarettes that his character was smoking in the movie. Apparently, a lot of real life smokers are calling out that like he doesn't smoke them correctly, and it looks like he's just holding them for effect. I don't know. I mean, he seemed like a chain smoker to me. I bought it,
Yeah.
but you know, some people are just saying like that is the only bad thing they can call out about his performance. So if the shit pile that is Reddit can only call out not convincingly smoking about this performance, then Cillian Murphy, I think you did pretty damn good. So nice job.
So wait, you don't think he'll be nominated for in the category of best smoking performance by a male actor, right? You don't think he'll be
I mean,
nominated for that?
he might be nominated, but the award itself will go up in a cloud of smoke for him.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I know. Robert Downey Jr., really great here for me as well. It's so good to see him do something that's not another fucking Marvel movie. Great performance here. In fact, at first I didn't realize it was Robert Downey Jr. Maybe it was the hairline, maybe it was the glasses. His face kind of looks more rotund than it did in some of his earlier films, but I think he did a really great job here. Wouldn't be surprised to see him get a nod for Best Supporting. Also, Emily Blunt and Florence fucking Pugh. Super, super great performances here. Really, really strong. Florence Pugh stands out in a couple of ways here that really brings her off the screen. And I think a lot of people appreciated
A
that.
couple of
But
ways.
on but on top of that, I think her acting was fantastic. She was really, really good here. There are some cool special effects. I don't know that I would say you need to see this movie in IMAX or even like DFX or whatever you call it. But, seeing it on a big screen, you get to see some of the cool things. They're in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. There's cool things with like sparks and like glowing lines and black and white and, kind of cinematic special effecty stuff. I was surprised to learn, and so I give Christopher Nolan some credit here, that all of this was done with practical effects. Not a single lick of it was CGI. And so,
Except for the smoking. I'm kidding.
except for the smoking. Uh, but yeah, so those are some things that I really liked. Some good sound design as well. In this film, definitely features some neat moments, especially around a particular moment in the film. We'll talk more about it in spoilers. But just some things. I'm not going to belabor them too much. I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but I will say for me, this movie was way too long. Didn't need to be 3 hours long. This movie tried to be like three different things. I felt like it didn't do any of them particularly well. And it just made the movie really confusing with some of, Christopher Nolan loves his skipping around, time jumps, nonlinear stories. It made parts of it hard to follow for me. I also have to call out that even though there were some cool things done with sound design, the score of this film, I thought initially maybe it was just the sound mixing at the Loft, babe. But I did some research as I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a Loft issue, and a lot of other people called this out too. The music just blares over a lot of the dialogue. Even in scenes where it's just people sitting around a table, like talking while they're smoking, there's like blaring action music happening. And in some cases, it makes it so that it's really hard to understand what's being said. Christopher Nolan has said in the past about Interstellar and Tenet that he does this very intentionally. It is a creative choice. He doesn't want you to hear all the lines of dialogue. He wants the bits you hear of dialogue and the music that you hear to create a mood. So for those that works for, awesome. That's great. But for someone like me, I really wanted to learn a lot about Oppenheimer and what was happening during this time. And I wanted to hear these like behind the scenes conversations and, give me a mood, great, but like I wanted to learn. And so that was not super great for me. I also don't understand why you need action music when people are just sitting around a table talking. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. The sparks and visual things were cool, but I feel like they were super overused and became really, really distracting. About halfway through the film, I'm just like, if I see one more fucking spark, I'm walking out. I didn't walk out. I stayed for the whole 3 hours, but it was a little bit much for me. But I mean, overall, this is definitely a very competent film. I won't be surprised to see it get some love come Oscar time. Personally, it wasn't a big recommend for me. I would say if you want to see this be a big, huge spectacle, then sure, see it in theaters. But Otherwise, maybe wait for streaming when you can like get up once an hour to go pee and not miss anything, because you can hit the pause button. But I will say, super, super cool that we had both Barbie and Oppenheimer. Jim and I saw people like going from Barbie in their pink clothes like into Oppenheimer, and vice versa. And it was really neat to see people kind of sing, their Barbie with their Oppenheimer. So super, super cool.
Yeah, I do want to tag on to what you said, Brad, about the movie being long, and it is certainly long. Um, I think it also had a bit of pacing issue for me, especially toward the end. Um, the movie comes to kind of like um, well, you know what? I think this is maybe a spoiler, so I'm going to
Yeah,
hold
we'll
off.
get to that in a minute because that's
Okay.
yeah.
But yeah, it there was a pacing switch at the end that really just didn't settle right with me. But
Yeah.
we'll
I
talk
th-
about it.
yeah. I think what worked really well for me too is how I think Nolan is one of those guys, and again, Gerwig is too, and that's why the joke this weekend is how different these movies are, and tonally they are, but just in terms of the way these filmmakers create their films, they're actually very, very similar, and that's what I kept finding myself drawn to, and thematically. Nolan is one of those people who he likes to tie a couple of themes together through kind of weaving in and out of them. And I really love this idea of destruction, which is obvious from the bomb perspective, of course, but just seeing the actual character of Robert Oppenheimer, with what Cillian Murphy does is he gets to go through the relationships, his career, just everything, and see how all of that, every action has a consequence, every action has some sort of destructive element that he then has to weave through and figure out and go through. And I think that's why I think sometimes the kind of the intercut stuff can feel weird, but I did like it very much here because it made that kind of exclamation point very clear for me as it was weaving through. It didn't just want to tell the story linearly to say this is what's happening. It said, well, this is the theme of what's happening, and here's the best way to tell that theme.
So
But I can't
that
talk
there's
about
probably a
that
lot of.
stuff because of the
I was just going to say, I think there's a lot that we want to discuss. Typically, the show would be ending at this point, but we still have a lot to talk about, I think. So, how do you fellas feel about moving things forward to spoilers so we can get these things out and expressed?
Yeah, let's explode this segment of the show into spoilers.
Hi, Barbie. I mean, yeah, let's do it.
Hi, Ken.
All right. Spoilers for Oppenheimer are incoming. If you haven't seen Oppenheimer yet and you don't want to be influenced or have your innocence ripped away where your knowledge of the plot of this movie is concerned, now is your chance to go ahead. And we're not doing plugs this week since we had two giant movies to talk about. So feel free to jettison from the live cast at this point if you need to. Or if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., you can go ahead and hit pause, go see Oppenheimer, or wait to see it on streaming, and then hopefully you remember to come back to this episode and listen to the rest that you didn't get to hear yet. But spoilers are happening right now. Where do you fellas want to begin?
I'd like to start with what I think is the main theme of this film, and is how, this was a biopic about a person. And I think it was about this man who really did, or at least the movie portrayed it, that he did struggle with what he was and what he represented. And he was, he was the father of the atomic bomb, right? I think they said something like that, right? And he did, he did struggle with that, even though it was a time of war, and he felt like he had no choice but to bring his creation, I guess you could call it, into the real world, and cause, on one hand, cause horrible, terrible destruction, right, to a certain, population or whatever. But on the other hand, perhaps ending, or perhaps ending the threat of a bigger issue, right? And that's what he struggled with the whole movie. And I think toward the end of the movie, there's some comments made about like how, at least we didn't like, destroy the whole earth. And then, the I think the line is, but maybe we did anyway. You know what I mean? Maybe it didn't happen then, but maybe it's going to happen. I just love the way the movie portrayed that. Especially you mentioned sound, and there's this like stomping noise. You didn't really know what it was until toward the end of the movie. It sounded almost like a drum beat kind of a thing that would come up every once in a while. And what it was the crowd cheering for him right after the bomb was dropped, and he realized like what a horrible thing had happened. It's just so like super. I don't know how to say it. The word isn't bittersweet, but it's just so ironic that all that death and destruction had to happen, and he felt the responsibility for that. And I, as somebody who, I'm no Oppenheimer, but I work in an industry. I work in the defense industry, and these are things that I struggle with on a much lower scale than he does. But sometimes I struggle with that. So I think that made me empathize with the character a little bit more, and I'm glad the movie brought that out.
Yeah, Jim, it's interesting that you call that out. Jesse, earlier in the pre-spoiler section, Jesse, I hope you don't mind waiting to bring this comment up until now. But Jesse commented that he was somewhat triggered by Oppenheimer, and he said that the bombs that were dropped on Japan, the first one being Hiroshima, the second one being 40%, even more explosive and damaging. He didn't know whether to cheer or be scarred by that. And I think there's a lot of conflicting feelings there. I certainly felt it too. There's this argument that the war was basically over at that point, and was Japan going to surrender or not? It sounded like maybe no. Did we need to drop the bomb twice to make it happen? It's a crazy point in history. It's incredibly sad and awful on so many levels. I'm sure there's like a novel out there exploring an alternate universe where we didn't drop the bomb and the Nazis won, but it's a real moral dilemma. I think there's a lot of struggle there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I think Nolan really does such a good job of here, right? And that's telling this story about what is somebody's most crowning achievement of their career and of their life, and presenting it as a horror story, right? Oppenheimer realizes what he's done. So does Einstein. So do some of the other people that he interacts with. But the problem is that most of the people don't. And so I think that point at the end is absolutely chilling and haunting, as we're sort of seeing kind of like the destruction of the world, and we're staring into Oppenheimer's eyes as it's just sort of like left haunted by this thing. But that's not the only thing that he destroyed. He destroyed several of his friendships, several of his relationships, and even his career through all of this stuff, and through some of the choices that he made and how he went about making them. So I thought that was interesting as well. This is every single one of these moments stems from his decision to be pulled into this project and what he does there, and then his behaviors as he's going through there. And it affects him on all of these different scales, from global to, his marriage. I think all of that was really, really, really hauntingly effective. Effective.
Yeah. I do want to get into, I know we're running long, but I wanted to get into what I thought kind of threw me back a little bit. The movie reaches kind of an emotional, an emotional peak for me. Like shortly after we learn that the bombs are dropped on Japan, and we start learning of like the effects of it, but then we see like all these American crowds in the gymnasium, stomping and cheering for him, and him struggling with that. But so we get all that, and then the movie. You think the movie's kind of ending at that point, right? You think the movie's ending, but no, you got another 40 minutes of, well, I don't know how long it was. It felt like 40 minutes of what normally would be like a couple of title cards at the end of a movie, like, J. Robert Oppenheimer was denied his security clearance and went, and was dropped out of the nuclear program and blah 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 by the U.S. government. You'd normally see that like in white block letters, like up on the screen, right before the credits play. But no, we get 30 minutes of like congressional hearing and more people talking in a room. To me, that kind of sucked the life out of what I thought was a really effective ending of this movie. Before they did that, that's the pacing part that I have trouble with, I think, with this movie. Anyway, it just seemed an odd choice to me, especially in a movie that's already long at that point. Like you add on more dudes in a room talking at each other.
So I looked at my watch. I know I'm not supposed to light it up in the movie theater, but I kept it mostly covered with my hands. And the bomb scene, which was really well done, especially for no CGI. Those effects were really really cool. But the bomb scene happens about 2 hours into the movie, so we've got about another hour, the whole third act.
Which bomb scene, babe, are you talking about? The one that was tested in
The
New Mexico, or when they dropped them on Japan?
uh, so when the bombs are dropped and we're dealing with the him going up in the crowd, and but like
Yeah.
the test is like a lead up to that, so I kind of look at it all as one and the same. But
Okay. Right.
at about 2 hours into the movie, we go into the last third of this film, and I was kind of befuddled for a second, because I thought that was such a poignant way to like end this and like show that conflict and his struggle. But then it became like a Law and Order episode or a West Wing episode, or I don't know. And it was just kind of bizarre that it just kept going, and I feel like it stole a lot of the impact away from that whole sequence that had happened, and it just sort of keeps adding layers and political intrigue, and why is Robert Downey Jr. doing this, and what's the point, and oh, now Kitty has her big moment, and I really loved that moment, and I liked the procedural stuff, but I don't know. I just felt like it was such a extra big thing to add on. I almost wish that it could have been like two separate movies, like Oppenheimer Part One, Oppenheimer Part Two. Make the science stuff and then make the political stuff. Um, and it's just kind of unfortunate. And I think because we have all this extra stuff tacked on with the political intrigue stuff, we kind of miss out on some of the really cool things that I think a lot of people were hoping to get out of this movie. I wanted to learn more about the project. I wanted to learn more about the science behind the bomb. We got a couple scenes of like people writing on chalkboards and smoking cigarettes, but then like we kind of blew past it. We got a couple
Marbles,
scenes of like putting
marbles,
pieces of the
Brad.
right. A couple scenes of like putting
Marbles in a
pieces
bowl.
of the bomb together, but then like we were kind of done with it. Like just the conversation ahead of making this weapon of like, I don't know, I could go on and on, but I felt like it made it very muddy, and the fact that it's nonlinear and it's really bouncing around a lot until we get to that last third, just kind of made it, I don't know, confusing and not as impactful. I felt like a crazy person coming out of this movie, because like everybody on Facebook was talking about what a masterpiece it was. But then I started reading a lot of reviews, and I felt like, okay, I'm not the only one who didn't think that this was the best thing ever made. So I think the cool thing, though, is whether you liked it, whether you loved it, whether you hated it, this movie is driving a lot of conversation and visibility around a point in time where the world was literally nuts, and awful things were happening, and hopefully its message helps us to avoid that kind of shit happening again. I mean, we've got wars going on all around the world right now, and um, it's kind of scary what it could come down to if like we decided to embrace nuclear arms, to the extent that we all could. I hope that never happens.
Well, and even thematically beyond that too. This movie is very much about the actions that we take now having ripple effects into the future, right? And so you can extend that metaphor beyond just the bomb itself. Although I don't want to diminish the bomb itself, it had a terrifying and terrible impact on our history, on the Japanese people, on wars, and the threat of wars that came in the decades afterwards. Like, I don't want to diminish any of that, but I also want to say that that extra layer of it is when we look at like the climate crisis and things along those lines, which are decisions being made by powerful men in powerful rooms. We're having decisions that are being made now we are right now, based on what we're doing in the climate crisis side of things, destroying the world later on. It just hasn't happened yet, right? And so I think that it's really interesting for us to say, like, okay, actions have consequences. What do we do about that? And when should we do something about them? Probably now, not tomorrow, or
Yeah.
probably yesterday, not
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I did really like, I know Brad and I agree, you know, the tech geek in me wants to see more about like how, I mean, they showed little bits and pieces, but not enough to really make anybody really understand the basics behind, you know, what makes one of these things an atom bomb versus an H bomb, or, you know, because they did throw those terms around interchangeably and you're like, what the heck? Um, Made me want to go do some research on my own. What I did like is how it showed they built the project itself. Like, you know, setting up shop in Los Alamos and how they got people onto the project and what they had to do. They had to set up housing and bring in their wives, and they made which made like a whole community out there in Los Alamos while they were doing this project, which was, I thought, was really cool. You know, and maybe a lot of people, including myself, didn't quite know what went into that. It wasn't just, you know, a van full of scientists and their bomb dragged out to the desert and, you know, hit the button. I mean, it was a big deal, and it was a big race, and you know, race against the Nazis and the Russians. And that kind of stuff was really cool. I like that historical angle to it. But the other thing that just came to my mind was how differently these two movies treat their female characters. Just think about that for a second. Like, the two female characters in this movie did not really get, you know, I don't know. They didn't seem to get a fair shake compared to the talk about the patriarchy. I mean, it was fully on display in this movie. And I don't know if that's the movie's fault or if that's history's fault. Maybe 50-50, cuz, you know, they could have told a little bit more of Kitty Oppenheimer's story, other than to tell us that she, you know, resented some of what her husband did and she drank a lot. Like, that's kind of all we got out of her character. And we didn't get, I wanted more out of the Florence Pugh character too. And those were the only two female characters, I think, in this film. It's kind of interesting.
This movie really was the Avengers of like male cameo appearances, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
every 2 minutes someone was popping up in this movie that I was not aware of. Just like all of a sudden you'd see like Jack Quaid or Benny Safdie or
Kenneth Branagh,
Rami
Matthew
Malek.
Modine.
Macon Blair.
Macon Blair, I was my favorite cameo in this film. Because I know I've talked about it on here, but like one of my favorite movies of all time is Blue Ruin, which he's the lead in.
Yeah.
So when I saw him show up on screen, I was just like, he's in it. He's in it. He's in the thing.
I like Macon Blair too, but like him and Scott Grimes, I can't remember them being in the movie that I just watched. So
he was Oppenheimer's like defense attorney during the board sessions.
yeah, that's totally.
He didn't have his beard
right
on.
vibe.
That's
He
maybe
didn't have-
why. Yeah.
Maybe.
And he is a little bigger than when we've previously seen him too.
I was gonna say that guy seemed like he was a little on the huskier side.
Yeah. And then gosh, also David Krumholtz was in there, who, I mean, this is a dude who you keep seeing show up and stuff, and here he's like in a what I believe to be sort of like a like a heavy suit, like of some type.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of it he put on, but this is the dude that played the friend of Wednesday and Pugsley Adams in the Adams Family Values at camp, and now he's just like the one of the like guys wheeling and dealing through all of these different things in this Nolan film. And I was just like, holy shit, David Krumholtz has been in a lot of things.
All right, so yours was Macon Blair, your favorite in this one. Mine was
Or-
David Dasmalchian.
Yes.
I'm like, God, my God. We just talked about him in something else we saw, right? I don't know. Maybe I
Late
plugged
Night
it.
with
It
the
was-
Devil, Suicide Squad.
Yeah, the horror
What
movie
else?
that was out a little while
The
ago.
Boogeyman.
The Boogeyman, yeah, right. That I plugged on another show. But I'm like, wow, shit, this is everybody in this freaking movie. But good on them, good on them
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Indeed.
Oh, and one other thing I will say, there is a chance we might see this movie again. We kind of had a substandard viewing experience, unfortunately, at the Loft. I picked 70 millimeter because, hey, it's 70 millimeter. How often do you get a chance to see films shot on 70 millimeter and projected on 70 millimeter anymore? So we went, and right off the bat, we're noticing like a strobing effect from the film, like all the way through the film, though. That was noticeable in brighter scenes. Like it was certainly
flicker.
noticeable. Certainly, like you could say a flicker or a strobing, and that was super distracting. And then I think, unfortunately, it was a packed auditorium, and of course the temperatures here are like 115 degrees outside, and I don't quite think their HVAC system was quite up to that amount of thermal load for 3 hours in that auditorium, because it got pretty toasty in there. So yeah, I really do want to see this film now. Now I want to see it. This is you can shoot me now for saying this if you want, but now I want to see this in like a DFX, like a digital, like a clean print version. I like all the film stuff, the filmic stuff. It's got a different look, and you get all these little you get those little film change cigarette mark things, between every reel, and you get the little pieces of lint that appear on the screen every once in a while. It gives it character. But in our case, we just got some stuff that did detract from and did distract me. Yeah. Jesse says the bulb was overheating from poor circulation. Jesse, that could be, but I thought maybe it was a bad calibration of the shutter or the gate or whatever they call it in the projector as well. But
I will say, guys, like I know that like when y'all are here, we usually see stuff. Normally when you're here, we're seeing like stuff at whatever the festival is having us see. Every so often you'll be here and we'll go to like one of the Alamo draft houses to see a movie, sort of like whatever major film is being released before the festival happens. But I would like to take y'all to, we have this place called the Bullock Texas History Museum, and it's like this, like it's our museum downtown, but they also have this like one of those
theater,
like true IMAX screens, just like
cool,
like the amphitheater seating and just the massive screens, and they predominantly use it for like oh, look at these like nature things,
overview of Texas,
blah, blah, blah. Or this is like under the water stuff. But they've started doing like these IMAX films. They'll be doing them as well. So that's where I did Mission Impossible. That's where I did this. That's where I did when they did that re-release of Rogue One. Right before Andor came out, we went and saw that, and it's a stunning theater. Like I would like to take y'all to that sometime. I don't know when and how we'll make that work, but just put it on the list.
Okay.
Sounds good to me. Looking forward to it. Want to give a shout out to Matthew, who says hello, Movie Bears podcast. Hey, Matthew.
Hey, Matthew.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
We are winding down at this point, but glad to see you hop on. Feel free to go back and watch what you missed. We had some pretty great discussion around Barbie and Oppenheimer on this show. And as always, Jim, Will, thank you for just being so great and so fun to talk to you about these films. Thank you as well to everybody who joined us in the live chat. To all of you who are out there in listener land, you may be listening to this a few days, weeks, months, maybe even decades from now. We love you too. And thank you for your support of the show. Guys, I know that next week we have another big show coming up. We're going to be talking Haunted Mansion and Talk to Me, an incredible horror movie coming out of South by Southwest, which is now going to be available to see this weekend. But in case people want to chat with us before our horror spectacular next week, let's tell them where they can find us online. Jim, we'll start with you, please.
Yeah, I'm still on Twitter. Is it still Twitter? Is it X?
X.
I'm glad it's
I
called
don't know.
X. I'm kind of glad it's going to be called X because ultimately I'm probably going to drop all my accounts on there except for my porn account. So I'll be able to remember X, like I used to watch XTube. Right now, it's just replacing XTube. Anyway, yeah, I'm on Twitter at JJP Out West, my initials and the words Out West. You can also find me on Letterboxd, where where I rate all my movies. I don't have full written reviews for most of the movies, but I do rate every movie I see. Please hit me up on there. Ask me about some of the movies I saw that you might be interested in, or tell me about one that you're interested in that I should see. That would be cool. So yeah, that's where you can find me. Oh, and on Facebook at Jim Pugliafico.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, sweetheart. Will, how about you?
Yeah, don't look for me on X. I'm still there, but not for long. It's a shit show. But you can find me on Letterboxd, still ranking and reviewing every movie I see. You can just look for William Lindis or my handle there, Fundamental. Just follow me. I'll follow you back. I do Facebook, and now you can also find me on TikTok and Blue Sky. I'm giving Blue Sky a try just to see if it's a viable alternative. I'm the movie bear on both platforms. So just if you happen to be one of like the 10 people that are on Blue Sky right now, give me an invite. I can't promise I'll still be there in 2 weeks, but I'm there today.
All right, excellent. Okay. And you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has Chubb /Chaser /Bear /Dolphin /Otter /Wolf /whatever silly label we call ourselves. Friends in common with you. Please just send a message first. The bots are getting cleverer and cleverer. I actually fell for a friend request from a bot. It happened. I've been so good for like the last 3 years, but I fell for it, and someone reported it to me. They're like, that's a bot, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that, because I had a whole like back and forth conversation and they seemed cool. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'm gullible, but I'm gonna try hard not to be fooled by the bots. Please just send a message. I may ask you to do some like math, or like ask you a weird off the wall question to verify that you're human somehow. If I ask you to do some CAPTCHA, please don't be offended. I would say you can find me on Twitter, but I think I'm pretty much done with my non-porn Twitter account too. I don't know if I'll join Threads. I really don't know if I need another social media platform. So Facebook is probably it for now. But you can also find me on Letterboxd at iBradPro, where I've also rated every movie I have seen so far this year. I'm phenomenally happy that Barbie is at the very top of my list. I sorted it by rating, and I'm like, holy shit, the Barbie movie, which I thought I would hate, really did that? Yes, it did. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. It was a pleasure. Go see Haunted Mansion. See Talk to Me this weekend relative to when we're recording, and join us next week for our Summer Horror Spectacular. We'll see y'all then. Take care, folks. Goodbye.
Bye, Barbie.
Bye.